Here we go. Welcome to the Profit Tool Belt podcast, just for construction and contracting business owners who are interested in the business of the contracting business. Let that one roll around in your head a bit. If you want to work smarter, not just harder, you're in the right place. Today's guest is going to be Greg De Simone. Greg and I are going to be talking about, hey, I want to sell my contracting business, but how? Now, this is a very special episode that has to do with selling contracting business, not just any business, but construction and contracting businesses. And Greg is an expert in this. I've worked with him for many years. I've seen him to do lots and lots of deals. Here's why this episode is important, because you have one business to sell, and Greg's going to make sure you get the most out of it. As a matter of fact, Greg is an expert at when a business owner like yourself gets approached by a big private equity firm or a venture capital fund and they want to buy your company. Greg comes in on your behalf and makes sure you get paid really well and that you're not chained by the neck to the deal for years to come unless it works in your favor. How's that for impact? Greg's really good at it. He's very lighthearted. He and I get along really well. We joke a lot, but we're dead serious. He's going to be talking about how to make some small changes that have a big impact in your company. Now, look, the only people that care about today's episode, or heck, this podcast in general, are contractors who said to themselves, hey, I'm really good at this trade, but I'm actually trying to grow a business here. I'm ready to get to the next level. And then they turn around and they say, hey, Dom, show me how. Well, let's do that. We're going to do that by unlocking a special box in your brain. Yeah, there's a box and it's in your brain. I don't know how big it is. It might be small, medium, or large. But either way, there's a key that opens the lock that opens the box. Inside that box is the business owner part of you, the part that's craving to know more about time, team, money, exit strategy, which is what you call what Greg does. Exit is selling the business, right? Growth strategy, marketing, sales, profitability. If you sat back and looked at all the episodes on this podcast, you would see that I'm trying to craft a very unique type of key, a key that unlocks that box in your brain to calm the voice that's asking all of those questions. So, what's this podcast in general all about? Well, I show contractors like you how to get back in control of their construction business, even if they don't know where to start. See, the truth is you don't need a lot of extra time or a business degree to build a profitable and solid contracting business. You just need simple systems. Those simple systems give you quiet confidence. Now, for too long, our industry has been keeping secrets, and I'm here to put an end to that. On this show, you're going to learn how to use simple systems in 3 places in your company: in the office, on a job site, and in your shop. Today, this is a strategy level conversation, so it's even higher than the office level. This is the shareholder level of your business. But more important than all of that, I also show people the secrets of business success, how to work smarter, not just harder, and how to have a mindset of growth. Now, speaking of mindset, I got a couple of dad jokes for you. Why dad jokes? Why bad jokes? Why dad jokes poorly delivered with poor timing? I want to get you laughing. And I want you to get your mind open to hear what our guest has to say. The best way to do that is through humor. We don't have to take ourselves too seriously. We can have a little bit of fun while we're growing and while we're learning together. So here we go. Got a couple of jokes for you, and they're generally in the theme of sales, since Greg helps people sell their business. So I went and looked for a theme and got some special jokes for this. All right, settle in, turn up the volume. Here we go. So the boss calls one of his employees into the office. Rob, he said, you've been with a company for a year. You started off as an office clerk. 1 week later, you're promoted to a sales position. A month after that, you're promoted to district manager of the whole sales department. Wow. And now just 4 short months later, you're promoted to vice chairman. It's now time for me to retire, and I want you to take over the company. What do you say to that? Thanks, said the employee. Thanks, the boss replied. Is that all you can say? I suppose not. Thanks, Dad. All right, listen. Next joke here. A sales rep who sells SEO, search engine optimization, and paid ads calls on Riley the roofer. You know, Riley, there's always a Riley the roofer in every city. Riley the roofer says, nah, we don't need marketing. It doesn't work. I've been in this business 41 years, never spent a penny on advertising yet. Well, the sales rep sits back and he says to Riley, he goes, really? Then can you tell me, what is that handsome building on top of the hill I can see out your window? Riley says, well, that's St. Catherine's Church. The sales rep asks him, well, has that church been there long? Riley shoots back. It's been there over 100 years. Sales rep thinks about it and says, they still ring the bell, don't they? Here's a joke I pulled out of the dregs of my brain. We talked about boxes in your brain. This one's old. My professor told me this. Economics professor told this to me once. He'd be so proud of me. I failed econ. I didn't get it. There was never a straight answer in economics. Anyways, this is a joke he used to tell. He'd say, he's big lecture hall with 300 of us in there. He's like, I'm a walking economy, My hairline is in recession. My stomach's always in inflation. And those two things together bring me into a deep depression. I know you're going to reuse that. Do you want me to repeat it for you? Starts like this. I'm a walking economy, My hairline is in recession. My stomach is always in inflation. And those two things together bring me into a deep depression. I love it. This one's a little bit more Greg De Simone. A banker fell overboard from a friend's sailboat. Also, the friend grabs a life ring and holds it up, and not knowing if the banker could swim, shouts, "Can you float alone?" The banker replies back, "Obviously, but this is a bad time to talk business." All right. If that didn't get you laughing, folks. Well, if that didn't get you laughing, it's not going to get any better from here. All right. Listen, if you're a business owner who's curious to find ways to run your business profitably, to have time off, to do the things you love, to build a team you can rely on, and grow a company that one day you can sell, like Greg's going to talk about here, pass it on to somebody else, or just live off the cash flow, you're in the right place. Definitely in the right place. I'm a business owner, as you know. I hope you also know I'm a business coach. And the only people that I work with are construction and contracting business owners who want to get to the next level in their business. And I host this podcast because, flat out, one day, I want to be your business coach. As a matter of fact, I have a team of business coaches that I have personally hand-selected and trained. I have very high expectations for the people that join my team, and I'm proud of every single one of them. So as you listen to this podcast, please ask yourself if you think me and my team might be the right tool to help you get to the next level one day. Now, with that being said, I'm going to go into business coach mode right now. I'm going to challenge you. In this episode, you're going to hear something or learn something or realize something, whatever it is. I want you to take action in the next 24 hours. So whatever time it is today, by the same time tomorrow, I want you to take action. And then I want you to pay attention to how that improves your business or your life. I hope you know this podcast is built to educate, inform, and inspire you. So let me get into your head, okay? I'm going to ask you this inspirational question. Are you happy being a contractor who runs a few crews, or are you ready to be a business person who just happens to run a construction company? By the end of today's episode, you're going to know the answer. Let's get to it. Mr. Greg De Simone, how are you?
I'm doing great, Dom. How are you?
I'm good. I'm glad to see it sunny in the background and not storming as it often is up in your part of the world.
It's sunny but cold.
Sunny but cold. Yeah. It just gives you the feeling that things are okay. Then you walk outside, you're like,
it's always okay to me.
Just feels my teeth. Yeah. This is not the first time you've been on the podcast.
No.
Well, it sounded like an interrogation, not an interview question, didn't it?
No. It's fun being out talking with you. I love talking business with you. I think we're kindred spirits in that. We do this because we want people to be better off than they were before they met us. And we want them to get the most out of their business. So that's why I love doing this podcast with you.
Yeah, me too. I certainly lean on you when it comes to questions, the big questions that people want to talk about, but they think they're never ready to talk about, which is, how do I sell my company? Who's ever going to buy my trades? Who would buy a trades company? It's just me and a couple of trucks. And you carry, how do I say that? I'm going to say this in a fantastic way. You come in on gilded wings with a chariot of angels. How's that?
That sounds right.
That sounds accurate. It's going, if we still have business
disagree,
cards.
But
So today we're going to talk about, I want to sell my business, but how? And you've sold a number of contracting companies. So that's why I've asked you back today. But before we get to that, Greg De Simone, I'm going to ask you a very important question. Who the heck are you? And how is it you come to be speaking to all these forward-facing contractors all over the world?
I am a M&A advisor, a sell-side M&A advisor.
A sell-side M&A advisor. Sorry. A
So
lot of
that
people don't know
means
what that is. Yeah, what that
that
means.
means I help people sell their business. There are
Okay.
people that help like big companies find small companies to buy. So they're buy side advisors. I'm sell side. I help the owner sell their company to a
Big company.
bigger company.
Okay. So you've just become very popular to a lot of people listening.
That's where typically I become public because people sit there going, how do I get, I put a lot of time and effort into this business.
Mm,
How do I get rewarded for all that time and effort?
yeah.
How do I sell this asset, not just take money out of this business, but how do I sell it and get money for selling what I built?
I love it. And what kind of businesses do you, just to give us the context, give us an example of a couple of businesses in the last year?
In the last year, it's been a lot in the trade space. For whatever reason, the market is hot right now, whether it's HVAC, roofing companies, anything that's home service based
Mm.
is hot. A lot of PE firms love the fact that you can't outsource it. You can't go to
What is a PE firm?
equity.
Oh,
PE
private
firm is a
equity.
private equity firm. So a PE firm, and so it's not an engineering firm, which sometimes gets confusing in the trade space. But a private equity firm is a bunch of investors put their money together. It's like a mutual fund, but they invest in private companies versus
Right.
public companies.
Yeah.
Um, and so these private equity firms or private equity groups are rolling up industry. So they sit there and go, hey, I love the roof, and this is what's happening in roofing. There's like 15 private equity firms looking in the roofing space, whether it's storm chasers that do insurance work, people that do new construction, or people that do residential replacement and remodeling. In fact, the residential remodeling space is probably the hottest across all the trades because everyone needs it. It becomes a recurring model.
Mm.
You're not tied to the whims of the construction and real estate market. You're tied to the needs of a homeowner.
Mm-hmm.
So those spaces are getting pretty hot across the board if you're doing those type of trade services.
It's interesting. And this is not the necessarily the main direction of today's meeting, but regionally, I'm starting to hear people asking about a slowdown. Is there a slowdown in the economy? And I'm not jumping on that bandwagon yet. You and I have been around long enough. I can tell by our hair, the color and lack of hair. You and I have been through a couple of different market shifts up and down, right?
Mhm.
But one of the things that people worry about is, oh my God, construction slowing down. They said so on the radio. Okay, well, cool your jets. Because when new construction slows down, what you just said happens.
Correct.
Home renovations, repairs, remodeling goes up, or it stays steady because
Mhm.
people stay in place.
Yeah, like I have a 20-year-old home. There's stuff that's going wrong with it. I'm not planning on selling it, so I have to find people that will service that. And the private equity firms are looking at that saying, there's all these services that people need. The client themselves aren't recurring, but the need is recurring because it's just a cycle of people that are going through the same process over and over and over again.
Right. So you said you sold a couple companies in this space. You've represented the sellers, which is interesting because that's who's listening to this
Mhm.
podcast. When they come to you to sell their business, what's their starting situation? Where are the gaps, and how can you identify those changes so that they can get the most for the business?
Sure. There's two ways that I get introduced to them. I'm going to tell you about the most recent way, and then I'm going to tell you about the way that where you can be more planful about it. Because the
Mm.
way I came into to contact with these two roofing companies, they were contacted by a private equity firm and a platform company. A platform company is the main company the private equity firm will stand behind. They say, "Hey, we love what you're doing in this space. You have enough size that we want to use you as our platform, and I'm going to acquire other companies and roll them all up and create a bigger company and get synergy."
It's interesting you say that because I just did this. I'm the business coach for one of those companies, one of those private equity roll up firms using a platform. And the platform in this case happens to be HOA maintenance. That's what they're
Yes,
launching it from. And so the PE firms in the back, and they're like, we need this, we need this, we need that. That'll create a bigger entity, which then they're going to sell to a bigger PE firm after they do some.
correct.
Yeah.
And that's where you make more money because you get a second bite, which means when they sell it again, you usually have a piece of the action, a little bit of stock. So you get a second bite of the apple.
You do realize we need to stop for just a moment because people have stopped doing whatever they're doing and they are scratching their heads furiously right now, going, what? This is what I'm just worried about maybe one day selling my business. And Greg and Dom just outlined how that business gets sold into a larger entity, gets reformatted inside that entity, and then it gets sold to another entity in the future. You
Yes.
realize what we've just done to a lot of people's heads right now.
Yeah, this is generational wealth creation. Your great grandkids, if you can't do this right, there's chances that your great grandkids don't have to work if they don't need to or want to.
Hmm.
Like
So we're creating spoiled brats.
well, we're creating the opportunity for families to create spoiled brats. We personally are not creating spoiled brats.
Yeah.
So the way I got introduced to these two companies, they got that knock on the door. They said, "Hey, we're in this space. We don't have a company in this area, and we want to get a company here. We think you're the right fit for that." Or in other cases, we like the way you're running your model. You're doing it differently than some other folks. We want to get your expertise under our umbrella so we can leverage your expertise with all of our other portfolio companies. We can all grow together.
Right.
So that's what happened. So I got introduced to them. So they were more reacting to, hey, people are interested in what I'm doing. I don't know what I'm doing. Like, I don't know what my business is worth. They're asking me for all this information. Should I give it to them? What should I say? What shouldn't I say? Are these guys for real? Or are they just like, is this a
Yeah.
scam? And I come in and help them. And people that are knocking on your door, they know what they're doing. They have a team of professionals. They know what the market is. When you get that knock on the door, you've probably never thought about it until you got that knock and you're like, what do I do next?
Yeah.
And not to brag, call me on what you do next, and I'll help you navigate that whole process so that you get the most value for that process. And I will tell you one thing is that you can only sell your business once.
Right.
You only got one chance to get it right. There are no do-overs. Like if you
When,
needed brain surgery, you wouldn't say, "Hey, I'm going to go do a YouTube, look at how you do it, and then try it on yourself and hope you don't screw it up." Granted, you're not going to kill yourself if you try to start your own business, but there's so many things that the professionals do over and over and over again. And if you don't ask, you're not going to get. You just
it's
need to know what to ask for.
Yeah, that's the point I wanted to double down on, because you raised an interesting angle here. Remember, we're in brand new uncharted territory for a lot of listeners. So if you see me interrupting you and asking you to go back and re-explain, it's because I really want to help people understand the core elements. We've probably got somebody listening now who's like doing 800 to maybe a million, 1.5 a year. They've got
Mhm.
5, 6, maybe 10 employees.
Yep.
This is certainly the podcast, the show where we talk about the business of the contracting business, but this is new language for a lot of people.
Yes.
They're moving from working hard to working smart by listening to this
Mhm.
show. And so what you just said there is so critically important. I want to remind people, when somebody knocks on your door, quote unquote, asks if you want to sell, it's not their first time doing this. They have a team. They're prepared. They already know how much they're willing to pay, what they're willing to do, what they're willing to not do. But you and I have just been running our company. We've been
Mhm.
doing flat roofing. We know everything about membranes. We know everything about this and that. Whatever our specialty is,
Right.
they're specialists in buying companies. So as Greg said, they already know what they're doing. You got to have somebody on your side, or you're going to leave so much money on the table, or you might blow the sale altogether.
The other thing to remember is this is taking it from the legal profession is what I call the Miranda rights of M&A or
The
of
more,
selling a business. Whatever you say can and will be used against you in a negotiation. You think you're being helpful by giving flavor and like, oh, you should be interested in this. And the other side may look at it and say, okay, that is interesting, but you just mentioned three other things that really are risky. And now I got to figure out, do I really want to buy this business, or how do I adjust the purchase price to account for that risk? When I talk to clients, and it's just like you're doing a deposition, or if you're on in court being a witness, if you've ever been that or watched on TV, the attorneys always say, answer only the question that's asked. Answer directly and succinctly. If they want more information, let them ask for it.
wow.
Do not volunteer more information because you're not helping the situation. Because they're going to come across as very friendly, like, oh, they're friendly. I just want to have a conversation. That's how they do it. They're not trying to trick you. They're trying to be friendly to get more and more information so they can make a better and more informed decision on how they're going to invest and how big of a check they're going to write. They're not doing it to swindle you. They're doing it because that's their job to make sure they make money on their investments. And they do it by being friendly and asking good questions and getting you to volunteer information. They're not doing it to cheat you. They're doing it to do their job right. You need to
Mm.
do your job right, and then we both meet in the middle. If everyone does it right, you're happy, they're happy, and everyone gives up a little bit, but we all move forward with a little bit better off than we were before we met each other.
That was fantastic. I want everybody to rewind and listen to what Greg said there. I've seen it happen so many times. One of the things that I've noticed is that I'm going to do it to myself in this statement. When I start phrases to a potential buyer that start with I,
Oh yeah.
well, Greg, why would the word I, the single letter word I, cause me problems in negotiations later?
Because people aren't, when businesses, private equity firms or companies acquire another company,
Mm,
they're not, they may invest in a little bit of your expertise, but they're really investing in the asset. The more the asset is relying on one person, the
mm,
owner, the less valuable it is. If we can demonstrate that the know-how and knowledge, client relationships, vendor relationships
mm-hmm.
are pushed down into the organization, and that if the owner leaves, that this will continue, that makes the business more valuable. They
Right.
may ask you to stay on because they like your strategic insight and your visionary outlook on the market. But if you're the only person that can do that and there's no push down, it becomes a lot more risky. So
So
the more we count this, Don, it's funny you bring that up. When we prep clients for their first meetings,
yeah.
we'll count how many times they say I versus we. If it's like an 80-20%, if it's at more than 20% I versus we have to rewind and say, let's practice this again. And it gets frustrating because you get used to saying, because you're proud of what you did. And you
Yeah, it's
should
my
be.
name on the van. Are you kidding me?
So it's hard, but it's but I find it, and I know Dom, you do too, is I find pride in when I train other people to think like me and to replicate my know-how. And if you can do that, there's more pride in that, and there's more value in that because you're not just the person who can do it.
Hmm.
You can teach other people how to do it, and that's where you become more
That's
valuable.
leadership. Yeah. There's again, there's going to be a lot of rewinding and re-listening to this episode. Um, there's so many
I'll give you
directions. I'm
Can I give
sorry.
you a fun story on this? The company I just sold down in Florida,
Okay.
it was $1 million company 10 years ago.
Sorry.
Group,
They're in Florida. They were a million. They did 1 million in sales 10 years ago.
yeah,
Okay. What
they're
industry?
28 million in revenue, and they sold their business in the high $30 million range. And their GM, who is the son of the first generation, he's staying on as part of this as one of the key executives.
Okay.
The reason his company became so valuable, he used the phrase, he says, there's lots of master roofers out there that can figure out how to do certain cuts and weaves and different ways you can manipulate shingles at the corners and different cuts and all that. He goes, so there's master roofers that can do that. I can't hire 100 master roofers. I need to be able to train people to do it the same way, simple way, over and over and over again, even if it's a complicated cut. So what we learned was how to do the difficult stuff in a simple formulaic way over and over and over again. And
Hmm.
because he did that, they were able to grow. And because they didn't need master roofers, they needed one master roofer to train everybody and learn the way they do it so they could replicate it and grow. And the other thing I love about this guy, and if we get to meet him, if you ever get to meet him, you should do so. The reason he went from 1 million to 28 million, goes, there's a lot of people in the space that are taking advantage of homeowners. Homeowners are getting, lack of a better word, screwed. He was, and I just couldn't stand it.
Hmm.
And I said, I need to help the business, the homeowner, excuse me. He said, but if I'm doing one or two roofs a week, I'm not helping enough people. I have to grow to help more people. He said
Wow.
it was his mission.
That's
I have
servant
to be
leadership.
bigger to help more people. And so yes, they're making more money and their family benefited from it. But his mission wasn't to make more money. That
His
was the
mission was
side
to help
effect
more
of
people.
helping more people.
That is such a great why. We talk about why. What's your why? The Simon
Yeah.
Sinek popularized that, 15 years ago, but That really, if you realize that you're surrounded by a lot of, and it doesn't matter what industry, we're not talking about roofing, we're talking about trades. But if you realize you're surrounded by a lot of unprofessional competitors, the way to help more people is to be more professional and help more people.
Right.
So when he was $1 million, what made him decide to change? And do you know the fundamental steps he took to change?
Yes, he grew up as a race car driver, NASCAR. And he
Oh
was
wow.
yeah,
Okay.
he was pretty good in the lower circuits, and then he became part of a pit crew. And if you look at his business, it's they don't have they have crew chiefs, and you have your
Ah,
crew that you work with, and you're a team, and they use the same methodology. Like because in NASCAR, the guy driving on the right is the guys on the track is getting all the accolades, but he needs a whole bunch of people behind him to do it
right.
right. And he says, I got to build the team. And he goes,
Hmm.
my guys, the roof are the race car drivers, but we got to build a team to make sure that they can win the race. So he fundamentally built his organization. How do I support the roofers so they can get out there, the crew can get out there and do their job better and faster and more efficiently.
Uh,
And then he built in back end marketing processes to fill in the pipeline and he kept
help
playing
more
with it
people.
to help more people. And then he extended once he saw where there was pockets of geographies local to where he was, but were underserved, he would move out his marketing to those areas and open up satellite locations to serve those areas. He didn't do it all at once. He did it in bite-sized chunks um, so that he could handle the growth. If
Right.
there's any hiccups, he could deal with it, tweak it, take best practices, lessons learned, and move forward.
Yeah. I'm dying to know if he used some sort of plan. Like I love strategic plans, Greg. I know you're a fan of strategic plans. You and I know each other from the early days of business. You and I have been business coaches before they were called business coaches.
Correct.
Yeah. And now
And
you're,
this guy did use a business coach and didn't use Dom, but he found a good one because when I was interested when I was talking to them, he was bringing up some language. I said, "Do you have a coach?" And he said, "I do." And I said, "It shows because you're using the right language. You're looking at a bigger perspective. You're not looking at what the task is. You're looking at what the strategy is and how do you
yeah.
push it down to the task level."
Yeah. That's a great point. So you already recognized in his language that he had an advisor in the background who was guiding him on the strategy, not
Yes,
just the next deal, like the
yes.
next roofing deal, roofing deal,
It
roofing
was
deal.
at the first time I talked to him, I said, "Well, this guy's pretty bright. He's on sharp." And then I talked to him the second time, and I asked him, I said, "You must have a coach, or you have a coach, or someone's helping you." He goes, "Oh
Yeah.
yeah, I couldn't do this on my own."
Yeah. That's excellent. So he, I want to go back to this. How did he get the knock on the door? How did he get somebody approaching him? Like, was he actively searching for a buyer, or was he in his
No,
office one day and got a phone call?
no, he's 35 and his parents were like 60. Um, so they were probably 5 years away from deciding to transition it to him. Or they were starting to transition to him. He was taking more and more, and they were slowing down a little bit. But the parents owned it. He was the GM.
Mm,
And like I said, there's a lot of private equity groups that were looking in this space. They were looking through Yelp reviews and Google reviews, and they saw they had a great reputation. They
right.
did some work and said, okay, these looks like they're the right size. And they knocked on the door and said, hey, we're interested in buying you.
Okay. Yeah. So it's so interesting. The deal that I'm just part of now, they've just bought a roofing company. So they're a HOA maintenance company, right? But they've just bought a roofing company. I think the deal is $6 million with a just under $2 million vendor take back.
Mhm.
And it went so smooth. But because that roofing company had a lot of systems in place and the owner was not involved in the day to day, they had, the crazy things, Greg, that you and I talk about: dashboards, cost control measures, people that reported, people that did the thing that they're supposed to do. Like, you've got an accountant you trust, you've got foremen or production managers you trust, and a whole bunch of those things lined up, and deal went through pretty smooth.
Yeah, if you have that infrastructure in place, there's always going to be hiccups, but they're always manageable. It's just a hiccup. You like hold your breath, they go away and you move forward. But if you don't have that plan in place, you don't have that infrastructure in place, sometimes those things can derail a deal, or you just get so desperate because now you've checked out, that you start giving away value because you just got to get this thing over with, and all it really took is a little bit of pre-planning, putting the right infrastructure in place, trusting your people, which will allow you to navigate any of the little curveballs or hiccups you get along the way.
So I want to ask two questions, so I better ask them up front because I'm going to forget. The first one is, from the first phone call to getting the first check, how long does that take? So that's my first question. First phone call to getting paid, like doing the deal and getting paid, how long does that take? And then the second question is fatal flaw. What's the fatal flaw that makes a private equity firm or another buyer just go, nope, can't buy this business, or this business is not viable? So those are the two questions I have to be reminded of.
Okay. Time frame. If someone's knocking on your door, it could be as quick as 5 months. Normally, it's probably 7 months, 8 months. If you're trying to go find a buyer from scratch, it's probably 8 to 12 months. The reason that takes it, the reason it takes that long, once someone's interested, you got to put together a package. And again, you don't have to put together the package they asked for. They're going to ask you more than they need to come up with a value. But it does take time to organize a package and to tell your story. So you take control of the story. Like if you're selling, you say, address the objections up front. You do the same thing when you put together a package. You say, here's what the story is. Here's some things that might concern you, but here's why you shouldn't be concerned. You put that package together.
Okay.
It takes about a month.
That's fast, Greg. I got to tell you, that's fast in my experience, because I usually see it taking longer. Now, that being said, you've seen many more business sales than I've seen.
Well, the thing is, you know what, in the first part of, particularly if someone's already interested, you know what you see the request list, you know what they're interested in, and you say, okay, I'm not giving you all that. It's too much. Like, it's our first date. Like, I haven't even kissed you yet. I don't even know if I want to go get lunch with you next week. Let's date a little bit. I'm going to give you some information to see if you're interested.
Right.
And if you're really interested, I'm going to give you more. By the time you get to the end, like you're on the altar, they know everything about you and there's no surprises. But I'll give you an example. Like I have a CPAP machine. You think if I was out in the dating scene, first date, like, you know what? I have restless leg syndrome and I wear a CPAP machine and I wear a night guard because I grind my teeth. I don't tell the girl that in the first date.
Yeah, that is not a high conversion rate strategy.
But by the time I'm married, like, they know all that. Like, and they like me so much, they say, oh yeah, a lot of people have CPAP.
Greg, I like, you're so serious and on point, and then I hope I'm a lot like this. Interject humor in the middle. And you're like, okay, this is just a normal guy having a normal conversation.
Yeah, and what you see is what you get. This is how I talk to the buyers. This is how I talk to the sellers. I mean,
with that deep Scottish accent. What part of the States are you in? Just so everybody knows.
I am in New England, Massachusetts.
Yeah, you're in Mass, but that doesn't mean you do deals all over the country.
Yeah. It's the buyers are everywhere, and the sellers are now coming from everywhere because the private equity firms are now referring me in because I'll tell you, private equity firms like when the other side's represented. They don't want to take advantage because if they're going to invest the time, they want to make sure it closes. And companies that are unrepresented, but 80% of them do not close because something goes wrong and they don't know how to handle it, or they mistake a question for, like, you hate me, you think my baby's ugly, I don't want to move forward, when it's just a normal question that you have to get past and do that. And it's also a lot of emotion. Like I use the example when you're doing this. If you ever been in an argument with someone or a discussion and you're on your way home or you're somewhere else and you're like, I should have said this.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I do that all the time.
If you're doing it on your own, you're face to face, that's going to happen over and over and over again. And and those people know how to ask questions. They can spin you in tops, not intentionally. It's what they're doing is trying to get information. If you have represented, you have that buffer. Like, you never have to answer right away. You can always craft the perfect response. And quite honestly, there may be a question that seems offensive to you, and say, this is why they're asking it, Dom.
Yeah.
It's a difficult to answer. It's going to be difficult for you to address, but it needs to be addressed if we want to get to the end line. Let's figure out how we want to do this.
Yeah.
And then you come back with less emotion, all facts, and you move forward with it.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so true. And I can't imagine what would offend anybody listening, but there are a number of things, because it's going to hit everybody differently. But the questions I've seen that people get offended by are, let's say I'm the potential buyer, and I'll say, Greg, I notice your wife's on the payroll making $250,000 a year. I don't see a desk in here for her. Tell me about that. And you can be offended and go, well, we're doing income split. I mean, it's all, but as soon as you start to back up and don't have a prescribed answer, that's just a black mark in the book.
Right.
It might not be a deal killer, but
Sorry.
they add up their black marks.
My assistant just came in.
That's your assistant. Beautiful assistant. I thought you had a black lab.
I do. That's my younger one. He's a rescue.
Okay. Sorry. So yeah, people get offended by different things, but you raised an important point that I want to double down on, is that a firm, a company that's going out to buy other companies, they have a machine in place, and their job is to buy other companies. They're going to buy you, or they're going to buy somebody else, but they have their systems and they have a process. And if we fall off that process, we kick out of the deal flow.
Right.
And so if we get stuck, or we slow down, or we don't answer the questions right, they're not emotional about it. They're like, no, that company's not viable. We're not going to buy them. And they move on to another one.
You're 100% right. It is a process and a job for them. It's emotional for you because it's your baby, and you can think of how hard it was to get to this point. They're looking at it as like, what can this asset do for me? Are there other assets I can buy instead of this asset? Yeah. So it's not personal. They don't dislike you or not like you. They're making financial decisions and strategic decisions in a very cutthroat, unemotional way. They're just like, I just need to make the best decision for my investors. Because they have people that put a lot of money into their fund, and they're expecting a return. So they have to make sure that they do their proper diligence and write checks that will get a return. It's not personal to you, because if they don't do that, their investors are going to say, I'm never going to give you more money again, and then their fund dries up.
Yeah. Yeah. Everybody has to deal honestly with each other. And
your question that you asked, though, was funny. I almost had something very similar to that. We prepped our client for this. It wasn't one of these roofing companies, it was a different company. And his wife was on the payroll. It was a sales operations manager. She did some work. She was paid about $80,000 a year, but she probably, based on what she was doing and the amount of hours she was putting, was probably worth 20. We actually, and I'll explain something, added that back, saying, hey, if you buy this company, we're paying this woman $80,000, but she's really doing $20,000 worth of value. You can replace her with a cheaper resource, or pay someone $80,000 and get 4 times the value. So we added back that $60,000.
Right. So you positioned it in advance.
Yes. Well, when we get in front of the buyer, and the owner did not want to offend his wife, who was in the room, and said, okay, what about this position? Can we replace you? You listed here's an ad back. It's like, no, she's invaluable. She does this, she does this, she does this. And I'm like, oh my gosh, the multiple. So the valuation, they were getting paid. The way the valuation came in when they made their offer was, we're going to pay you 5 times what your earnings were.
Yeah.
So we added back $60K for synergistic salary savings. Like, hey, we're overpaying $60,000 for this. And this is a determination we went through. We all talked about, the wife knew this, but he did not want to offend his wife in this meeting. And he said how invaluable she was and how great she is. They said, okay, we have to get rid of that ad back. That's $60,000 times 5. He lost $300,000 with the value, because he couldn't stick to a strip. He just felt bad saying his wife wasn't contributing $80,000 value. So that's the type of stuff that happes. Now, when we coached and prepped,
well, it sounds like you do a lot of scripting in advance. I like to do scripting as well, like as much as possible, because it just takes the stress out of the situation. Yeah, role play. Yeah. So if I'm $1 million company listening to this right now, Greg, and nobody's knocking at my door, I'm still in the truck, I'm still on the tools, I don't have a functional team, I don't have a NASCAR background, I don't have anything you laid out. Where do I start today to get myself on the path to maybe one day selling, and maybe not? Maybe I'm just rolling in the cash from cash flow, but where do I start?
Yeah, I call it the holy trinity of improving the value of business.
Okay.
Growth matters. If your industry is growing at 10% per year, you need to be growing at 15 or more. Growing at industry average is you're a good company and it's great, but you're not going to get a premium. So growth matters. So what's the infrastructure you have to put in place to do that? Two is, who is your second layer of management? Who is the next level of people that you can rely on and to implement your strategic vision? If you have that layer of management, it really improves the value. Some people say, well, I'm creating additional cost and I'm going to make less money, which it's counter. When you start to put that layer of management in place, people then take ownership for their role. You get to step up and do bigger things. You get to find different market niches.
Yeah.
And you start to grow your business. It seems counterintuitive, but being able to push work down and rely on other people within the organization to have client relationships, manage your teams, manage the vendor relationships, manage your operations and accounting and HR and IT. So that's not only when you have people doing those things that you focus on strategy and identifying market trends and shifts, because markets don't stay the same.
Yeah.
New construction goes up, new construction goes down. People want this. Maybe there's new opportunities with the new developments, whatever. If you're busy doing this, you don't see this.
Yeah.
And opportunities are up here. They're not down here.
Yeah. The money's not in the sawdust anymore.
No, I mean,
Right.
You have to do that work. You have to do it well and do it repeatable and consistent with quality. But the value is seeing market opportunities. For example, it's a different industry, but it's a security guard company.
Security guard company?
Security guard company, like you have a hole in the ground, you stand around, make sure no one walks into it. You're at a stadium or for university games, they're wearing the yellow, orange, green jackets. So you see, you have a movie set and the people making sure people don't come around the movie. They did all this stuff. They were doing this for a hospital, and they asked and it was right on, and I'm in Boston, it was along the marathon track right after the Boston Marathon.
I know exactly where that is. I crossed that finish line.
You did.
I did.
You did. I saw the picture. There's a hospital halfway between the finish line and the start line, and there was a client of theirs, and they said, "Hey, how can I help you?" He said, "You know what? We're getting more and more stuff's going to be tracked to us where because of what happened during the bombing, where they're doing more emergency planning, contingency planning, and they're changing the rules on what we can do for different things." You go, one of the biggest issues we're facing right now because of all these different requirements in planning is that if you have patients that have flight risks or a dangerous themselves, suicide risk, agitated, dementia, whatever it is, you used to be able to monitor them through video. And they said, you can't do that anymore. You have to have someone within close proximity, within 30 feet, and you can have them not watching more than 2 people at a time. Well, hospitals couldn't take nurses off the floor. They couldn't take technicians off the floor.
Oh my God. So they had to hire security guards to do this.
Security guards. So these guys, and the security guards they had up front weren't trained for it because they would say, hey, checking badge IDs or hey, don't go past this fence while we're doing our construction. He said, if I train people to handle this situation and I find a way to be able to deliver the service on demand so that you don't have to pay for people when you don't need them. Like you may have 5 people one day and 40 people the next day. If I can flex, will you buy that service? And so he had his event staff of 1,000 people that were sitting around doing nothing except when there's a concert or a game or whatever. Said, hey, if we train you how to do this patient watch and meet their requirements, will you be interested in getting additional work? And they all said yes. Then they figured out, hey, how do we figure out how to flex this demand? And they said, you know who needs to deal with demand every single day? Schools. If a teacher calls sick in the morning at 4 o'clock, you have to find a replacement really quickly. And you have a roster of people to call, and then they sign up. So they trained their event staff who were sitting around waiting for events. They took the software from the school systems and used it to create an on-demand scheduling system for the guards that were sitting around. They went from 13 million to 35 million. The reason he did it is he wasn't worried about how do I
schedule this next event?
Or how do I hey, do I get another event? Or hey, how do we get more people for this event? Or how do we find another movie set? He asked the client, what is an issue that you need? They told it, and he said, well, if I do this, this, and this, will you buy it? And they said yes, and they bought it in droves. And then that company got bought, and they became the platform, and they're using that model all across the country now.
That is fantastic. So that answers the whole question. What do I have to do different if I'm whatever size I am, I don't want to say that you're small, but whatever size you are today, and I just peg the number doing $1 million in sales because it's
Mhm.
so easy to hang our hat on. You just have to get to that point where you've got people you can delegate to who have responsibility over their divisions. You've got
Mhm.
dashboards in place, Greg. I imagine you want to see their data. You want clean data,
Yeah,
information, you want a good
absolutely.
information flow. You want people responsible for their jobs. You know, one of the tragic things I see too often, and I'm not picking on this position, but a lot of people accept bad bookkeeping or
Yeah.
in like, they hire a bookkeeper and they'll say something to me like, she's great. She just doesn't show up very much. She's always sick. She's taking care of a bunch of kids. They're always sick. And so we don't really get the reports we need, but she's nice and we don't want to let her go. And I'm like, oh my God, this is when I talk about the fatal flaw,
That's a fatal
there are
flaw.
fatal flaws in business.
Not knowing your numbers is a fatal flaw.
Yeah.
If you don't understand how your activities translate to financial results and can't understand how your operating metrics that drive financial results impact your business and how to identify the problem before it shows up in your financials, you're going to be a problem.
Yeah.
Because I'll tell you, when you go to sell, the buyers will find it right away. They will find it immediately. That's their job. That's what they're doing. Like,
Yeah.
okay, basically it's the old Reagan trust but verify.
Right.
We're going to tell them all these great things about you. And they go, that's great. Now we signed a letter of intent, which means it's an engagement ring. We agreed on a price. So we agreed we're
Yeah.
going to close by this date. Now we're going to do diligence. Diligence, we call it confirmatory diligence. It's trust but verify. We trust you. That's a
Yeah.
great story, but now we want to prove it to us.
Hey, it's fine. You're going to find the ugly. This goes back to your dating analogy. You're dating a girl, everything's going great. She's fantastic. And then you go to the first Christmas event and you realize her brother is the fatal flaw in this relationship. You're like, I'm not marrying
Yes,
the brother, but oh my God, what's going on in that guy's head? And you
right.
you have to make your assessment. Is this part of the deal I want to take on? Because that guy's a whack job for whatever reason, right? And that goes along with the dating analogy.
Yeah, I would say not having good financial data and not having the metrics to drive like there's a lot of companies that they'll hire bookkeepers and like, yeah, my it works. I got all the numbers in my QuickBooks. It goes to my CPA. Minimizes my tax liability. And he say, "Oh, what's your margin?" I don't know. I'm like, well, because you should have your production labor in one spot and your overhead labor in another spot. You should have your materials that are going to the job site in margin.
Mm-hmm.
If you're permitting, the permitting shouldn't be in overhead, it should be in your, so you need to know what your real margins, because they're going to ask you, what are your margins? And I've had people like, oh, my margins are like 10%. I'm like, holy crap.
No, that's not good.
I said,
But they're confusing
the
gross and net. I mean, even as a net, that's not good.
they'll just say, right. They'll give their net number. And I said that they don't care about your net number because they're going to fix the overhead and find a way to make it more efficient. They need to know that what you're selling to the client is creating a good contribution, a good margin for them. You need to know that. You need to know, are there certain types of jobs that get better margins? Is commercial better than residential? Is a replacement better than a new install?
The ideal client Greg, I have to interrupt you for a second. For everybody listening to this show right now, what Greg is talking about is the end of job report, the end of job summary, and the go back report. Sorry for that brief commercial interlude. But those are the tools that we use and we talk about here all the time on the show, because if you don't have those, you don't have the
Right.
good data to make logical decisions.
Right. Well, it's funny. We went through a deal. It wasn't one of these two. It was 3 years ago. We were going through with a client, and the industry margins were like 38%, and our client was at like 34. And they said, "Why are you at
This
34%?"
is gross profit margin,
Gross profit margin.
right?
It was in the HVAC space. And they said, actually, it's 33. It was exactly 5% difference. And they said, "Why are you? What do you think the gap is?" And we started talking to them, and I said, "Well, what are you pricing it at? Like, how do you price it?" And he says, "Oh, we do this, and this." And I calculate with him, like, "So you're pricing it at a 40% margin?" And went through. He goes, "Yeah, that's correct." I said, "But you're coming in 33%.
Mm.
Do you know where the leakage is?"
The
No.
profit leak. Yeah.
So they price it above industry average, but their results were 5% below industry average. But as we went through all this analysis to get them ready to sell, well, they were pricing everything at regular time, but they were 10% of their labor was overtime.
Ah, okay. So they were
They
tracking.
had whether you were if you were on a a scheduled call or an emergency call. You got the same price. Well, if you're in an emergency call, it's an on demand. You have to do real quick, and you're being disruptive. No one was paying a premium for emergency. They were paying the same, right? Whether you scheduled in advance and worked with you, you got the same price as someone who threw your day into a tizzy because they had an emergency.
Such a simple thing. And yeah, like, can I be gracious? Can I be a nice guy to the people listening? I think, Greg, you and I both get it that that's what happens because you've got other things to focus on in the business. You're
Right.
busy. You got a million things pulling at you. You know, this is a problem. We're not, what Greg's talking about here isn't a surprise. You're like, I always know that's been a problem. The point is when you have other people in the company to take on their departmental roles, whatever, the foreman, the crew chief, crew lead, bookkeeper, it doesn't matter what it is, you can move up in the company truly to a general manager role and say, you know, what we need to fix is this piece of the gross profit margin.
Right.
And then you put things in place and you start to pick away at it slowly. So I just want to be gracious to people because we all know we have problems in our business, and there's a list of problems, those list of 1 to 10. Something's got to be number 10 and something's got to be number 1. Well, that's what we do in business coaching. You just, and it's prioritization for impact, right?
Well, and that guy that sold his business in Florida for like in the high 30 million range, and the one I did down in Rhode Island in the 40 million range. It's not like they had the right answer every single time, but they had the space to say, this isn't going the way I expected. I thought it would do this. It's not. Why is it going different than we planned? And it wasn't like disastrous. It just wasn't going the way they planned. And because they had people in place, they could step back and say, this is what we thought. This is what's happening. Is it fixable or do we need to modify a process? And did a constant iteration. So it wasn't like you don't have to get it right every single time, but you have to have the process where you can identify what's not going as expected and have the bandwidth to identify it and then readjust your plan. It's an iterative process, like learning how to, like if you're going to make a mistake, figure it out quickly and fix it quickly.
Yeah.
Because you are going to make mistakes. There's nothing wrong with making a mistake. It's letting it stay and ignoring it, or letting it stay and know it's there and just not finding time to fix it. Having that layer in place allows you to be the entrepreneur. Like that story about the security guard. He's not an entrepreneur because he thought of like a whole new widget or a new app or a new software. He just asked the client, said, hey, what do you need? How can I help you? And he answered it. The guy down in Florida said, like, how do I help people not get taken advantage of by roofers?
Yeah.
What are the other roofers doing that I can do differently so that they come to me, not them? And if you're not on the roof, if you're not in the sawdust in the toolbox, like Don says, and you can actually talk to your clients and like figure out what they need to, you can identify where the shifts are and you can tweak your model so that they want to deal with you because you're solving their problem. You're not just a guy that can swing a hammer, a nail gun.
Yeah.
You are someone who can solve their problem. Everyone wants a problem solved, not the task done.
Yeah. So Greg, you align so well with the premise of the show, which is people come here to listen how to be a business person who just happens to be a contractor. So that gentleman who sold the security company was listening to the market. It sounded like there's a change in legislation or maybe in the rules of the hospital.
There's rules for the hospital to get accreditation. Yeah.
Yeah. But he had to be somewhere in that conversation or hear about the conversation and go, hey, they can't put expensive, highly trained nurses in charge of that, but I can put my lower cost contracted people in charge of that on a flexible basis and take advantage of this rule change. And then the roofing guy figured out a way to do what he was doing in a repeatable fashion. So there's always something different. And by the way, not every buyer that is not every, I was going to say private equity firm, but they're not always PE firms. Not every buyer wants the same thing. They might come to you and take a pass.
Right.
But let me say this and then argue back with me. If the first company that comes to buy me takes a pass, I'm now ready for when the second company comes. So even that's not a failure.
No, it's you take that information. Why are you passing? What scared you off? What was risky for you?
Yeah, and you can have. And by the way, the Greg De Simones of the world, you can have that as a totally unemotional conversation. Whereas I can't. My wife's in the room. She was a huge part of the business when we started. Now she's not so much. I still pay her 80 grand. She does 20 grand worth of work. I don't want to offend her because it's my wife. And no matter what deal we sell, she's still going to be my wife. But you can have that conversation totally unemotionally. What scared you off?
Mm-hmm. And we do that all the time and provide that feedback.
Yeah.
just because you're not sellable to one person doesn't mean you're not sellable ever. And maybe you are sellable, but not at the value you want. Again, I use this phrase with my clients when they come to me, not when they're knocking the door, but they say, "Hey, what is my business worth?"
Hmm.
And I tell them, and they say, "Well, I need 5 million more to make it worth my while so I can retire." I'm like, well, here's what your business needs to look like. Um, when we go through that process, I mean, it's really just saying, okay, here's where you are, here's where you need to go. What do you need to do differently?
Yeah.
And there's nothing that you're doing wrong. It's just like to get where you want, you might have to do things differently. And we're going to help you identify what those different things are.
That's exactly what I talk about as a coach, as you know. Yeah. Greg, let's start to wind up. And so let me do this. Let me ask, if somebody wants to continue this conversation with you, how do we find you in this big wide world, and take us from there?
Sure. Contact me at Greg at catapultadvisorygroup.com. I also say you can visit my website at catapultadvisorygroup.com, except it won't be up until the end of January. This is December. I just launched, I was on another firm. I just launched my own M&A firm. So I'm on my own with a team of 3 or 4 other people right now. And we're in the process of getting all the infrastructure in place and hiring all the people to
Yeah.
do the stuff that Don's talking about. So I can focus on doing deals and helping my clients
Yeah.
versus all the other stuff.
Let me just add something. You're going off under a new banner, but you and I have known each other for many years where you've been doing this inside another banner. So if
Right.
people can't find Greg where he was just mentioning, reach me and I'll put you in touch with Greg. You're on LinkedIn as well, Greg De Simone.
Greg De Simone, Desimone, right on LinkedIn, and hopefully it comes up a lot because I'm trying to keep it refreshed. So when you search, you find me before any other Greg De
We'll
Simone.
find you. We'll find. And then, of course, there's the show notes from this particular podcast as well. So, again, folks, if you're in any of the platforms that I'm on, I can introduce you to Greg as well. But he's worth finding. This has been an amazingly insightful conversation, and I think there's a lot of people listening who are in that range where they're $1 to $3 million, and they're like, I don't even know if I want to sell. But the things that you and I talk about are consistent enough to know that they're on the right path just by listening to the show.
Correct.
Well, Greg, thank you very much for being a guest. I'm about to ask you if you can come back a couple more times this year, but act surprised when I ask you that later.
I'm always happy to talk to you, Dom, and I want to make sure people get the most money for their business and that they get a good return for their lifetime investment. So I want to help as many people sell their businesses profitably as possible. So I market by education. If you don't use me, great. But if the stuff I tell you helps you get more value for your business, then I'm happy.
Yeah, awesome. Greg De Simone, thanks for being on the show. We'll see you again.
Thanks, Dom. Merry
Yeah,
Christmas.
bye-bye. Well, what did you learn from Mr. Greg De Simone? The more important, what can you put in place in your business? There's a lot of insight there that Greg shared. I'm going to have him back a couple more times this year because I really enjoy the way he talks about things and the kind of insight he brings. For those of you watching this as a video, you can see me looking all over the place because we got some nice testimonials back from people. This one here is a Basement Systems location. Many of you know this company. It just says, letter for Dom. Dear Dom, since we started, things have changed for us. We have reports and know our numbers. Greg was talking about that today. It's nice to know and not have to guess if our crew will be working in the next week. Jeff and I now talk about the perfect customer all the time. We know when we have a new job, if they are good for us or not. Catch this part here. This is really cool. Last week, we turned down our first job ever. We've never done that before, but him and his wife had too many of those red flags we talked about. Instead of saying no, we priced it way high and they still took it. So we ended up telling them we're booked up. Jeff and I now play that game, so pricing high on that deal was interesting. Things change when we don't need the next job. Thanks. Let me know if this is what you need, Rob, Basement Systems. So that's pretty cool. We were talking about him writing a letter to himself about the success, and that's the letter that he wrote to himself, to me, as part of his coaching. Here's another coaching testimonial. It's actually a screen capture from a coaching agenda. So the assignment for the customer, for the client, was to do some end of job reports. The end of job reports are important because they tell you if you're profitable on a job by job basis. What you don't know is that the end of job has a hidden purpose for myself and the coaches on my team. We want you to do the end of job reports, so you know your numbers for sure. But at the end of the end of job report, you do a little exercise that's called Profit Lab. And that Profit Lab is where you find the opportunity. Because usually you spent too much money or you didn't spend enough money, or you found a way to do it cheaper, which is fantastic. We're allowed to do that as long as the quality is there. Or you spent too much, right? Labor was high, transportation was like, whatever it is. But you find those things out, but it's not important that you as the owner know that. You have to talk about it. Your estimator, your foreman, if you've got an installer or a dispatcher, maybe they have to hear about it as well. Everybody's trade is set up a little bit different, right? But who are the key people in your business that need to know about that? Well, that's what that profit report called the end of job report does for you. So here's their comment inside their coaching agenda. They did another 13 end of job reports in the 2 weeks between the time we met. We are now at 34% gross profit, which is pretty good. We've seen higher. A couple of weeks ago, you heard me talk about Nick, who's now at the 60% gross profit level. These guys are happy in the 34% GP level, but I'm not done with them yet. So we're definitely increasing our GP. We'll be getting it up in the 50, 54, 55% range very soon. They now know this, though. Install is making $1,448 per job versus $300 per job. So they weren't tracking how much they were making on a per job basis on the install part. And then we also broke it down for them in zones. And so this testimonial here says zones 1 and 2 are good. 3 is a bit lower. Really some interesting things going on out there in the market as people, other contractors just like you, are starting to get more control over their business and understanding the levers they need to push or they need to pull or what to ignore. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed that. Listen, today we're going to simplify and solve a common problem. And that problem is the problem that Greg and I talked about here today when we talked about selling your business. Now, Greg is a very specific type of business broker. When somebody like you gets a call from a private equity firm or from something called a family office, Greg knows this entire different language, by the way. A family office is somebody that sold their business for like a gajillion bucks. And now they have an office, and all that office does is invest in other opportunities. It's just called a family office. By the way, use that at the next cocktail party you go to. You'll sound very intelligent. It's called a family office. And then a PE firm is a private equity firm. That could also be a family office, but sometimes it's something else. But I'm not going to get into the definitions. Anyways, the point here being, Greg knows that language. When a buyer approaches you, let's just say it's you, and you run a home renovations company, home remodeler, or a roofing company, or a basement systems, and they say, hey, we want to buy you. How do you know how to walk through that conversation? Like, you can freewheel it all you want, but if you've never been through that, you're going to get shackled at some point. There are decisions you can make and ways to structure things that are going to get you in a lot of trouble or free up a lot of time and opportunity for you. So it's important that you know there's 3 types of buyers who are going to approach you. There's only 3 types of buyers. So that's the problem that we reach in our business. Now, the problem is once you sell that business, you only have one business to sell. Look at how hard it took you to get where you are today. How many years do you have behind the saddle? Behind the wheel? In the saddle? How many years have you been at this? Are you going to start another business after this one? I don't know. Yes or no. I'm on my 3rd significant business, this being the 3rd. And I don't know how many more I'm going to start. And I've already built and sold 2. I mean, I've built and sold a bunch, but 2 of them have been significant. It's a lot of work. Do you want to do it again? And if not, why don't you get as much as you can out of this business when you sell it, right? So over the years, from being a business coach, from walking people through this, but working with professionals like Greg and some others, buying and selling my own companies, I put together a document. It's called the 3 types of buyers for your contracting business, because there's only 3. You can overcomplicate it all you want. You can get all fancy with graphs and stuff like this. And look, there's 3 kinds of buyers for your business. Do you want to know what they are? I can tell you right now. The 3 types of buyers are this. Somebody who's going to pay you fair market value for your business. They're going to pay you exactly what it's worth. There's also a type of buyer who's going to pay you more than fair market value. Who wouldn't want to meet that guy? And then there's a 3rd type of buyer. And that 3rd type of buyer is what we call a vulture capitalist. And that person is going to pay you less than your company is worth. Those are the 3 types of buyers, my friends. And when you simplify things like that, it makes everything a lot easier. And you could smell the BS and the pitchfork it came out on much faster. This document here helps you figure it out. It's called the 3 types of buyers. If you want it, shoot me a text. You guys know how to do that. Just text me at 315-903-7853 and then just say 3 types of buyers. Then I know which document to send you. There's 3 types of buyers for your contracting business. And then as you go through this report, how many pages? It's 12 pages. It's not that long. Print it off. Talk to your business partner about it. Maybe you're a family business and you have to start having that conversation with people around you who have an interest in the business, but maybe don't work in it every day. You just want to get that conversation going. Sometimes just getting the conversation going is the job. You're in the company every day, but now you got to get this conversation started, right? What I do in this is break things down into 3 things that I found to be very important when I'm looking at who's going to be buying my business. And by the way, I want to do that on purpose. You want to build, and Greg will tell you the same thing. When you build your company because you want to sell it, you change the way you do things. You start to make it look the way it needs to look so that the right buyer will want to buy it, right? The way a buyer is going to want to buy it. For instance, there's certain buyers out there who only want recurring revenue businesses. They might want to buy something called a SaaS, software as a service business, or a service business that has multiple repeat customer visits. So pool cleaning or software or alarm monitoring, because every customer is going to pay you every single month. And a lot of buyers out there, these PE firms and these family offices, they like that because they know it's recurring cash flow. Same reason that you would buy an apartment building, because it's going to be recurring cash flow. Other people don't want that at all. They want to have significant project sizes, and they only want to buy construction companies that serve the civil market. So it's doing work for highways and bridges and things like that. Everybody's got their flavor, but you have to know who's going to buy you. And then you organize your business to align with that. And that's inside the report here. So for us as the sellers, there's 3 things I want to know. How much money am I going to get? How long is it going to take me to do the transaction? And here's what I'm talking about when I talk about the chains around your neck. How much owner involvement is there going to be after the sale is done? How much owner involvement is there going to be? Now, if you want to sell it and walk away, you can do that. You can negotiate that right into the deal. Greg will show you how, or you can do it on your own. But you got to understand that with every yin, there's a yang. With every give, there's a take. Anyways, the report goes through that. You want to know how much you're going to get, how long it's going to take to sell, how much do I have to be involved after the business sells. It's all broken down here. As a matter of fact, against those 3 different criteria, I've got a couple of different paths laid out. Those paths, if you want this and that and this, you got to do this. If you want this combination, here's what to do. So it's laid out pretty well for you to take advantage of that. And then you've got the different types of buyers to take into account, so you can walk them through your process instead of you being forced into theirs. If that makes sense. Anyways, this certainly isn't a report that most of you are ready for. Most of you aren't ready to sell the business, but for those of you who are, or who are curious, or maybe you have a family business and you want to start the conversation, grab this report for me. It's called the 3 types of buyers. You just shoot me a text at 315-903-7853 and text me and say, Dom, 3 types of buyers. And then I'll go, okay. And then off it goes. Again, download it, get it on your hard drive, make it your document, not mine. It's there for you to print off. It's there for you to use when you need it. Don't be stuck against a wall going, who's the guy that had that report? And did I ever get it? Where is it? No, grab it from me now. Just grab the thing. Grab it, have it on your hard drive. Knowledge is power, and having this stuff gives you the power, right? Once you have all this, then you can start to make the decisions about the changes you need to make in the company. Actually, let's go back to the family business thing for a second. Maybe casually, you guys have, or maybe not so casually, as a family business, you've said, one day we're going to sell this business. Okay, well, where does that go? Let's say you've got 3 partners in the business. There's always one that runs the business and 2 that make the demands. Sorry, just is what it is, right? Now everybody interacts the way they do and contribute the way they do, but somebody has to take the lead on that conversation. Well, where do you start? You start with, it's a free download. I mean, it's not going to cost you anything, but get it, print it off, print 3 copies, give one to everybody and say, hey guys, read this next Tuesday at 2. Let's leave the office for lunch together and just talk about it. Conversation started. Tick. That's all you got to do is start the conversation. Conversation is going to get harder. It's going to get easier. Whatever it is, it is. But if you want to start the conversation, you got to start somewhere. You might as well start with something intelligent and easy to understand that everybody can look at and point at. That's how I'd suggest it. Anyways, I hope that really helps. I want to say thanks to Greg De Simone for being back on the show. I'm going to have him back a couple times this year because I just love Greg's insights into selling a business and how to arrange things so that you get the maximum value for it at the end. Listen, until we get to that point in time when you and I can have a cup of coffee or a glass of wine across the table from each other, this podcast is going to have to do. But I want you to know that I'm not very happy about that. I would much rather have a cup of coffee or a glass of wine. Did I say that right? Cup of wine, glass of coffee. You know what I mean? But across the table from each other, like real humans talking. Until then, the podcast is going to have to do. Thanks for checking in. I hope you're enjoying the show. We'll see you on the next episode. Bye-bye.